It's very good to be here. I'd like to thank John and Steve, especially, for trusting me and putting a designer on stage first thing in the morning at a very technical conference. What does this do? Oh my God, what is happening? All right, so far so good. All right, let's see if this works. Can you see what I'm seeing yet? No, not yet. All right. Have I destroyed it? I see a guy waving his hands in the back. That can't be a good sign. What have I done? This looks all right. Let me try unplugging, plugging in again. Oh yeah, I'm sending you signal, so it should be working. There it goes. All right, how about that? I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right.
This audience is used to all things going wrong.
Ah, I see. I unplugged the power. Good. Okay. Perfect. All right.
Thank you.
Shall I plug back in? Are you all right over there? There we go. Here we go. Thank you. Thanks. And not with a little bit of irony, the talk is called Designing for Disaster. And I'm going to talk today about how teams can live and thrive in the cloud. And you will notice that it's a perfectly clear sky in that slide, but I will talk about the cloud in just a minute. But I thought it'd be worthwhile, since I come from a design background, though in a very technical sense. And I wanted to just give you 1 minute on sort of what I've done before this, so you know just a tiny bit about me. I've started working on the web about as early as you could commercially. I was part of the team that built this website. Does anybody here recognize this? A couple people? See? All right, good. There's a few people who've been around for a while as well. This was one of the first commercial websites. I actually think O'Reilly beat us out the gate first with ad banners on the web. But this was back in 1994 that we built Hotwired. I was at Wired for a bunch of years when we did a bunch of things, including got acquired by Lycos. And then after that, started a design agency in San Francisco called Adaptive Path that focused on, really we did a lot of design work for the small companies that eventually became Web 2.0. And very proud of a lot of the work we did there. While we were there, we built our own product, which was called MeasureMap. Kind of led a team that did analytics specifically for blogs. This was about in 2005. In 2006, it was acquired by Google and was merged in with their Urchin acquisition and became analytics. And this is the design work that we did on Google Analytics, redesigning the Urchin product to become Google Analytics and a free product and things like that. After a bunch of years at Google, which were just phenomenal, we started this company called Typekit, which I'll tell you more about in a minute, that was focused on bringing fonts to the web for the first time, implementing the W3C's CSS at font face tag, but across a bunch of commercial foundries. And just last month, we were acquired by Adobe. So now I'm a senior product director at Adobe and starting, again, the swing from small company to big company, as I've done throughout my career. Typekit itself is a very distributed company. We got up to about 20 employees, so we never grew that big, but we were sort of in a bunch of different time zones. And while this is my first trip to Berlin, about 3 months ago, we opened an office here. So I'm glad to be here for the first time to see both the people that are working here and to sort of see the city that we've expanded into. And wow, what a fantastic city you have. I got some time to check it out over the last couple of days. But I want to tell you this story about something that happened to Typekit about a year ago. And I want to start in a slightly different way. And I'd like you to visualize with me being in a boat like this. Imagine sort of one of the best places you've ever been, out in nature, out on a lake perhaps. Sun is just rising. It's quiet, very still, mist on the lake, and you're paddling along, very peaceful. When, all of a sudden, there's a splash, and your boat tips over, and you find yourself in the water, and the water's freezing cold, and you're kind of gasping, and like, what happened? Very surprised. And you look up, once you get out of the water, and realize that there's a bunch of teenagers, and they're pointing at you, and they're laughing, and they've just had a little bit of fun and flipped your boat over. How would you feel at that moment? Would you be perhaps afraid of the teenagers, perhaps angry, perhaps vengeful of what just happened to you. All of those would be very normal emotions to feel for any of us in a situation like that. But now imagine sort of we rewind again and it's calm and it's peaceful and you're paddling, sun just rising, mist on the water. And it happens again. You hear this big splash, boat flips over, you come up out of the water, it's cold, freezing, you're choking on the water, and you look, and there's driftwood, a log that has hit your boat, flipped you over, and washed up on the shore. How would you feel now? Would you be afraid of the log? Would you be angry or vengeful at the stupid log that flipped you over? Maybe, but those might not be the most valid emotions to feel. But imagine for a moment that you would feel the same way toward the log as perhaps you might process the emotions around the teenagers, that you could feel the same way for both, that this was just an event that happened. It was unfortunate that it happened, but you were prepared for it, and you could feel the same way, a sort of grace under pressure. Or another word for this is equanimity. Now, equanimity is sort of defined as a state of mental or emotional stability, especially in a difficult situation, when things happen unexpectedly, and you're able to deal with that situation with calm, with grace, with clarity of thought. Another way of defining this term is seeing with understanding. And this is a term that I find incredibly useful when we're developing things on the web, when we're developing things with teams, especially at large scales, especially services that people come to depend on, that all sorts of things can happen, both expected and unexpected, that could cause your team to feel a lot of anxiety and to really freak out. But to approach them with equanimity and to build this sense of equanimity in teams that are responsible for the most important services on the web is crucial to foster innovation, so that teams can feel relaxed and confident that what they're doing is anticipated, and that everything that they can go forward to do, they can be creative and they can be confident that what they built in the past will sort of survive and last. So I want to start the story that happened to us that really tested our equanimity that our team faced. That happened, like I said, about a year ago on December 17 at 6:24 in the morning. I woke up, not to the sound of my alarm, but to the sound of splashing water, and I found this in my bathroom. So the good news is I know who this is. This is my son. He's about 2 years old. The bad news is he'd apparently been at it for a while and was on his third roll of toilet paper, stuffing it down into the toilet. Equanimity in a time of turmoil. So we sorted out this problem and got up and started our normal routine. My normal routine is generally to log into our group chat, where our team sort of lives and breathes. It's sort of the heartbeat of our company. And I realized at 6:30 in the morning already, things were really happening. We use Campfire. There's a lot of different tools that you could use for this. But things were going on very, very quickly, already at 6:30 in the morning. And I could see that pages had gone off and things were really sort of going bad, and went and looked at how many of you look at one of these every morning? I would imagine a number of you do if you're in any sort of operations role. We have a dashboard full of very intricate details, including a chart that looked like this. Yeah, it's sort of the universal language of, oh my God, right? Like, and so to help understand this chart, let me tell you just a little bit about Typekit. Like I said, we do fonts and bring them to the web. One of the problems with web fonts today is that, like most new web standards, there's no standard way of implementing it, right? And so it's sort of fractured across all the different browsers with different font formats, different security methods, and things like that. We host all the fonts centrally and send them out so that our customers can simply put a line of code on their site. And all the fonts work on all the tablets and phones and browsers that there are. That central hosting is a tremendous responsibility because we're responsible for the style of our customer sites, and we're on nearly 1 million websites now. So it's a kind of a big deal for us to never have a chart that looks like that. So our users go around and they choose fonts, and then they sort of decide which fonts that they want and configure them, and then they push that publish button, and that's where the magic happens and fonts show up on their website. And that happens by a little bit of technical magic, as it were, on the back end, in that we take the fonts, we combine them with some JavaScript and some CSS, and some configuration from our database about our users, and put that all together into a thing that we call a kit, this magical thing that then we move out onto the web, and it starts working on their site. This kit is sort of an abstraction of all of those pieces put together. And here's what we found out. And here's sort of what happens then, right? We take that kit and we move it out onto the web. And normally when I speak to designers or marketers or whatever, I have to go through a big explanation of what a CDN is and what an origin server is, but I'll probably skip that at this conference. But then, we do sort of move everything out, distribute it out to the edge. Fonts are served very quickly and cached, and it's all very fast. That's good. We made a very important technical architectural decision early on when we were developing Typekit, and that we would have the web app that was responsible for choosing fonts and configuration separate from the distribution. The only connection is sort of moving those fonts over, and then we don't touch them again. That means we can iterate quickly on the web app side and never have to worry about affecting the quality of service or any of that on the serving side. That has worked really, really well for us. And that helps you sort of understand what's happening here, because this is a chart that shows the number of kits that our users have published that are waiting in a job queue to go to the CDN. So our users are hitting that publish button, and it's all working, but their websites just aren't updating at all. And that means as the kits are moving to the CDN, here's a very technical diagram here. It's starting to look like this, right? Oh no, nothing's moving, nothing's moving. And that is the problem we're having, and that's what the chart is showing. Oh my God, right? So, and that is what the chart is showing. So by 10 a.m., we have our morning stand-up here at our Typekit office in San Francisco with everybody else around the world dialed in, and realize that we have identified the source of the problem, which is a good thing, and that is one of our partner websites called AboutMe. All of the kit traffic that's coming, that's backing up our servers, is coming from this one source. So that's great. This is a pretty unique customer in that instead of using fonts themselves, they make their fonts available to their customers using this sort of font menu. It's very intuitive. People can click and add fonts to their profiles as profiles then get published out. It's a little bit like Facebook without the social network. You just sort of get to show everybody how you can be connected. And what we found out was this partner was in TechCrunch that day, and they were getting a tremendous amount of traffic, not only from that, but the fact that they had decided to launch. They had been in beta. They opened up to 400,000 new users that morning. And so I thought, well, a phone call would have been nice, but okay, we can probably deal with this. And so I called the CEO, Tony Conrad. And I said, who's pictured here, and I said to him, hey, you got a lot of traffic today. And he's like, yes, we do. Is that okay? I'm like, fine, it's fine. We're going to deal with it. It might be a little bit slow this morning, but we'll catch up. I said. So it's part of the job, I think. He said, that's great because, well, I have some news. Can you keep a secret? I'm like, yeah? He said, yeah, so we got acquired by AOL. We're announcing on Monday. Will you guys be ready for that traffic? And I said, of course, we'll be ready. It's only the weekend before Christmas. We can certainly be ready for that. And he said, great, that's good. And because back in Silicon Valley is a very weird and small and incestuous place, it's worth noting that not only is Tony the CEO of AboutMe, he's also an investor at True Ventures who happens to be our lead investor and sits on our board at Typekit. See how that all works? So I'm not only talking to a big partner, but I'm talking to essentially my boss, saying, it's all going to be fine. We'll be ready for you on Monday. But in the back of my mind, of course, this is what I see happening. Oh my God, oh my God. And I figure, well, this is our company here, right here, like that. Okay, that's good, perfect. This is great. So we pull the team together and say, okay, it's the Friday before Christmas. It's the biggest social weekend of the year. We need to sort this out, right? This is where you sort of cash those checks that you've been sort of promising as a startup. You say, look, this is why we joined the company, right? You have a tremendous amount of autonomy and a tremendous amount of impact here, but this is where the responsibility comes in. We got to fix this. This is incredibly important. And the small group of engineers that we identified as being the people who would be able to fix this problem all said, yeah, we'll sign up for this. Our CTO was heading on Monday the 20th, was heading to Boston to see family. And our lead engineer, Paul Hammond, who is actually very involved here in Velocity, was heading that afternoon to go to Tahoe to go snowboarding, and they all said, look, whatever it takes, we'll stay, we'll do it. And that's pretty remarkable, and it's one of the reasons that I like such small, tight teams. So the first thing we did was at least put some structure around what we were trying to do, and we would say, okay, on Friday, the 17th, we'll spend whatever it takes to identify the problem with as much detail as we can, so that on Saturday, the 18th, we can build a solution, and on Sunday, the 19th, we can deploy that solution for us, and integrate with our partners in case they need to do any code deploys as well. So at least we had some structure here. We would not stop each day until we had finished this one task, but when that task was done, we knew that the next day we would have time to do it, to take the next one. So the first thing we did was sequester that team, right? We had identified who was available, or who was the most, the right people for this job to solve this problem. We put them together and put them off in a conference room, and everybody knew you can't go in that conference room. They will come out if they need anything. Very similar to sort of what big operations like, for example, Mission Control at NASA do when they have a space shuttle in the air. With a much smaller responsibility than they do, but that level of sort of, that team is off solving a problem. Everybody knows what their job is to do. Don't bother them is very important. That was physical isolation, so to speak. Sort of psychological isolation is really important as well. And so I made them the promise that they had to worry about nothing on the business side, right? That's sort of opposite of this T-shirt where you guys write the code so I don't have to worry about that. I'll take care of everything in the business so you only have to worry about the technical problem that you're. That was sort of the commitment I could make to say, look, if we have to like throw all those kits away, right, so that none of the users get the fonts, we'll do it. I'll make that call. Don't worry about it. I will talk to everybody, all of our customers, all of our partners. That frees them up from having to keep that in their minds as well as they're trying to solve the problem. Then, of course, moral support, right? We do whatever we can to help them out there. These are all techniques that I picked up at Google, frankly, because Google has this thing called code yellow that will occasionally happen. And this can come from Larry and Sergey that said, all right, we have a problem, we're going to solve it, nothing else happens. The people who are responsible for it are sequestered. They don't have to worry about anything except that problem. It's a code yellow feature freeze. That happens from time to time at Google, and it's a very effective way of focusing the company on big and small problems. For example, one time, Steve, you were probably involved in this while we were at Google. We spent 6 weeks, I think, no new features, any development team, all you focus on are the milliseconds of latency in your application. Just do it. And very effective to take everybody's attention, focus it in one place, solve a problem, and then go back to work. So we were, the team was sequestered. It was Friday afternoon. I was watching the sun set in San Francisco behind Sutro Tower there. And that was sort of where we were. We had set up the conditions for success. Right? We had done everything we could to make sure that team could be successful. We had used structure to manage anxiety, right? To put boxes around the things that we knew we could solve. Without there just being chaos in the office and nobody knowing what's going on or anything like that. And it really comes down to waiting. And this is the part in sort of your career that you sort of set up for. To think like, okay, everything is here now, right? Like there are a lot of reasons that I really want this to not be happening right now, and the ones that are under our control are, and the ones that aren't really are just, we just have to wait for that. And that waiting is, frankly, incredibly difficult because I want to just keep helping, but we have to realize that people who know what they're doing are doing what they can. We've given them everything we can, and now we have to sort of see where they'll come. And this means, like, I have to stop worrying about reputation, about our investors, and frankly, even about our customers right now. Because if we can't solve this problem, we won't have a product for them, and we won't have customers. So right now, it's just a matter of being calm. And maybe that's a message you can bring back to the C-level executives in your organization. But there's a time when you just have to trust the team. So by the end of the 17th, we had identified the problem, which was our one goal. We had found out that we are making fonts and kits as fast as we can, and that we are sending them as fast as we can, and they're kind of bouncing off of our CDN provider. They're not landing as we send them out. And there was very little we could do about that. And the result was that their origin server was not accepting kits from us at the rate in which we were creating them, period. And we had talked to everybody over there at our CDN provider, who will remain nameless during this presentation. And so on the 18th, we had decided the task will be to write our own origin server and deploy that. And this is where we got one of the big breaks in this whole scenario, in that we had already planned to do that because there was a bunch of features that we wanted to add to Origin Server, including lots of ability to set our own caches based on different variables in the application and things like that that weren't available to us. So we had a plan for that, which we would create an Origin Server in probably about 8 weeks' time of development. So we thought we would do that on the 18th instead. Good. So. But this is also an example of that notion in the startup world of the minimum viable product, right? What is the smallest possible amount of work that we could do to get something minimal that would actually solve the problem that we're facing, so that we can build on top of that? And so they did, and they streamlined it down to just a thing that they knew would work. They tested it very, very quickly and deployed it and had it get to work on the backlog of 150,000 kits that were waiting to be published, and let it run overnight on the 17th, so that we woke up on the 18th and we were caught up. There were no more jobs in the job queue, and everything was out on the CDN. We spent Sunday really testing to make sure what we had built would be sustainable in production, and working with our partner, AboutMe, to sort of, they had to make some code changes on their configuration for a new origin server and deployed. And by Monday morning, we were able to keep up with the new normal of this sustained traffic and fonts were showing up on people's profiles. So, oh my God, it worked. But this is a very good example, I think, of setting up a team that, for success here. Yeah, this is Paul saying, like, we did it in an afternoon. Yeah, so it would be easy to say this is an example of our culture in action, but what I think is this is really an example of all the effort that we put into culture so that it worked at the time it was there, right? Culture, I don't think, happens in a disaster scenario. Culture is tested by one. It's very much like your immune system in your body is waiting for you to get sick, and the better your immune system is, the less likely that is to happen. It's a really good example of how culture in teams really plays out. And I like to define that as a sense of equanimity, that the team was very calm and structured in their thinking in a situation that could have caused a tremendous amount of anxiety. Now, when I talk about this sort of Zen-like equanimity, right, I don't mean you all have to like shave your heads and become vegans and have an office that looks like this, right? It is something that's very easy to practice in day-to-day life for people who don't have sort of deep spirituality and things like that. It's perfectly fine. And in fact, I'd like to spend the last sort of 10 minutes that we have today talking about the 3 very simple things that you can do with your teams to sort of promote this sense of equanimity with them. The first being creating safety nets, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. Then looking for objective process that you can apply to very subjective situations. And then finally, how can we be driven by purpose? So let me dig into these 3 things very quickly, because even if you feel very confident about how your product works and scales and has disaster recovery, the reality of the web is, and the reality of the cloud is, we depend on a tremendous amount of third-party services now. Everybody does, right? Whether it's your DNS provider, all the way through the stack, all the way up to the visual design that you have, it's very likely that you're depending on things that you didn't write. And those things can break, as we saw earlier this year when a good chunk of the services that I use every day went down because Amazon went down in their Eastern availability zone for 2.5 days, ultimately. And so having systems that are completely redundant like that is very rare these days, and we all sort of know that and do a lot of testing and trusting of each other, but stuff happens, right? And so having these sort of safety nets, or as I like to call them, emergency response protocol, when bad things happen, that's because I'm from San Francisco, which falls down every 100 years, is really, really important. And so we've developed at Typekit a very simple sort of emergency response protocol so that when this stuff happens, we have clear and immediate roles for people that they can step right into and know how to behave, right? It's how emergency response teams behave all the time. So very simply, we have a repair team, right? These are the individuals who've been identified that can solve this particular problem. It's the first step. Who can fix this, right? The second is then to get what we call sort of the scribe, right, or a note taker who can report out to the rest of the team, because we can't fix it, and so we're all like nervously waiting for them to let us know what's happening, which is much better than us nervously asking them every 5 minutes if there's been any change. So one of the people on the repair team takes on the role of pushing content or statuses out to the rest of us so that we know how to communicate to the people who are affected, whether they're customers or partners or things like that. And then a communications manager, right, who is responsible for taking everything that's happening and synthesizing it into the right messages to go to the right people at the right times. Now, sometimes the repair team is 2 people, and the note taker and communication manager is one of those people, a small problem, right, that we can just quickly solve. It takes about 15 minutes or whatever, and it's done. Those things are... it scales depending on sort of the problem. But when that happens, what we've done is had our communications director, a person who is sort of responsible for marketing, write up canned responses that they can put on the status blog and send out via Twitter and email to different customers based on what has happened, right? So you can sort of look down this spreadsheet and say, okay, this is the kind of problem we're having. What do I say? So you don't have to compose like well-written responses every time something happens. You can just look and do it. And this is probably also so our communications director doesn't get woken up in the middle of the night. But it's very, very effective. We also think about our application not just as the typekit.com web app, which is the thing that our users see, but 3 separate applications that we have to invest an equal amount of time into. One is that customer-facing thing, but also a partner-facing website that we have created that gives them a lot of information and tools to help. And this is mostly, in our case, for people who make fonts. And the third, though, is an application that we use ourselves to monitor the health of our systems. Now, I showed you a very, very simple sort of dashboard, but that really is only the technical systems. And inspired by what 37 Signals has done with this sort of activity stream of what's happening on their site, we've built this, which is an internal tool just for us to consume that shows not just technical health of the site, right, but what the public is saying about us, what kind of behavior is happening, financial flow of behavior that's happening and things like that, so that we can see up to the minute what's going on. And since we are very driven by design culture, it's also very attractive since we have to look at it every day. But the important thing of this is to put this where it is in front of people all the time. Now, most people kind of will have this in a tab open all day long, and I don't have a photo of ours, but inspired by what Panic Software has done, we make this sort of out in where the team is. Just get a big monitor, because those things are cheap now, put it up and display stuff all the time where the team can see it. Equally important is displaying in as transparently a way as you can to the outside world, right? To say, look, this is how things are right now. No matter how embarrassed or how bad it seems from the inside, it'll only get amplified if your customers don't know what's happening, right? So making this sort of thing very, very visible to them is important. And my time just changed. I really have 30 seconds? The clock just switched. I lost 5 minutes. Anyway, I'll try to go very quickly. And when you do have a problem, right, being very, very explicit about that with your customers and explaining with as much detail as you can, again, regardless of how embarrassed you are. I'm going to skip over this next one because I'm sure a lot of you have heard about that already, and I'm going to go right to, I have 5 minutes, perfect. I'm going to skip right over to here and talk about an objective process for very what can be very subjective situations, and that's something that I like to call ambient accountability. Now, I mentioned Campfire early on as the heartbeat, the pulse of our company. I bet a lot of you are probably familiar with IRC as real-time chat for doing that kind of stuff. There's lots of tools for that. I love it. And we have built our company around this idea of real-time chat all the time, to the degree that we only really use email for big ideas. But the day-to-day always happens in real-time chat. I like it because of the compression of communication. How many of you could get like a 2 or 3 paragraph email from your boss and reply back with this? Email has this sense of formality that you have to write a bunch and like, well, thank you for your email. I'm glad you sent that. I've thought about what you've said. Like, get rid of all of that. And just like when you're in chat, somebody can literally say, let's see, like a conversation like this, which happens every day in our kind of chat room, right? Cool, right there, problem solved. How long did that take? 10 seconds, that's perfect. I love that kind of compression and that kind of speed that we can have when we're doing this sort of stuff. The other thing it does, and this is the sort of accountability part, is we built this Typekit robot, right, which is a series of scripts that talk to APIs and dump stuff into Campfire so that everybody kind of knows what's going on. And more importantly, the only place that they can get information about their job, that they need to do their job, is in the chat room. So that means they just keep going there all the time. And so participation is just obvious, right? So we do things like code deploys and pull requests and support tickets and revenue events and all the sort of things that you saw on that Pulse dashboard also get piped into the room, and that works very, very well for everybody. The last one I want to talk about is design process, and that is the design critique. This is a photograph of Frank Lloyd Wright, the famous architect, the room in which he would take his students and they would do design critique. And I guess my first advice is don't put a big plant in front of the thing you want to critique, but hey, he's the architect, so that must work for him. But this is something that I spent a lot of time working on while I was at Google, because while I was at Google, design review tended to look a little bit like this, right? Where designers would show up with their like beautiful little ideas as clay pigeons and throw them up in the air, and everybody would just take a shot at it, right? And I hated that. So we've worked really hard on making it a very objective process and a very collaborative process. For one, I don't call it design review. I call it product review, and anybody can bring anything, whether it's a developer or operations or design. And we say that that attendance is optional. Anybody from the company can come, from our office manager to anybody, but that participation is mandatory when you're there. So everybody pays attention, they're very focused. It's also not a forum for expressing opinions. It's about having discussions and solving problems. And let me give you an example of that. I would often hear things like, I don't like that blue, right there. I don't like the blue. And that's not very effective, right? That's an opinion that you might have, and it's a valid opinion to have, but it doesn't matter for the conversation. I think better is to say, why? Why is that blue there? And even better than that is saying, is color important here? Right? Stepping back from what your opinions are and trying to understand the decision-making process in our products is something that whole teams should collaborate on and contribute to, and is very, very important. And then finally, we define each one of these sessions as whether it's convergent or divergent. And we do that at the very beginning, and somebody steps up and says, all right, I would like to have a divergent conversation about the thing that I'm working on. And that means you start, right, very small and broaden out. I want as many ideas to help me solve this problem as I possibly can. So everything, let's just talk about everything, versus, all right, this is a convergent conversation, right? I have identified a problem, I have made a solution, we have agreed on that solution. I want to get down to the thing we think we should all launch. So let's not brainstorm now, right? Like, I don't need a ton of new ideas. I need to get down to this one idea. And so that sets a tone for each meeting where if we're divergent, we're brainstorming, it's limited possibility. We're always saying yes, and we could do more. If it's convergent, we're evaluating feasibility and acknowledging constraints, and we're working to get to consensus, and that helps a lot. For those of you, if you search for Cassie McDaniel, you'll find this article at A List Apart, which is a fantastic guide to that. So all of this can come together into very important sort of acknowledgement that this stuff is hard, right? Like when I think about the user experience and the design work that I do, I think about the things on the screen. That tends to be the stuff above the waterline here. When I think about the decisions that go into it and the operations and all the kind of stuff that the people in this room we sort of collectively work on, it's everything else that goes below that is even more important to the success of the application, right? The design might be the first thing that people see and the first impression that they have, but the stuff underneath is the thing that's going to build trust with our users, right? And let them feel confident that the things that we have built are sustainable and built to last. Because even the slightest problem, even the littlest glitch will cause this, right? This, to me, is just like the worst thing that can happen. When not only that that 140 characters sort of condenses everything into either it's awesome or it has failed, and we have nothing in between now, but it represents also how the smallest little problem can destroy the trust that you have and can spread like wildfire through our social networks. And that's so critical that we sort of keep that. So just a sort of quick, tiny review. On the safety nets, this sort of objective process for subjective situations. And then finally sort of driven by purpose, right? And that's a thing that I find incredibly important, right? And this is a little more abstract, but it is sort of a culmination of all that sort of work that we've done to build the culture into the teams and test it out through the disasters that we faced and recovered from and things like that. And that is a communication that we measure momentum in days, right? Like, that was a great, we do this every week. We sort of review the last 5 days that have happened on a team and really sort of talk every day. Every morning, the entire team gets together in a stand-up, 15 minutes long. If it's longer than that, we've broken it, right? And we say, that was great. Good progress. We measure our projects then in weeks, right? We look back, we look forward, we say how many weeks will something take, how much daily momentum will it take us to get there, when will we go out with the next thing. We measure priorities then in months, right? Like we look at what could get done and focus on in the next few months to get things shipped in this quarter. Again, culmination of the daily momentum, the weekly feature releases into those priorities that we're going to set and communicate very clearly. But then the vision, how all of this sort of rolls up into what are we doing here? What is our purpose for being? That is the kind of thing that takes years for us to sort of see, to build towards, to keep driving towards. But it is just as important that you give daily feedback to measure momentum as it is that you sort of have a guidepost that you're shooting towards, right? Both of those things, those bookends, are incredibly, incredibly important. So, sorry, I got to skip ahead here for reasons of time. I just want to say that the people in this room are responsible now for, and this can sound a little lofty, but I would say a culmination of all of the sort of human history that we have so far. We are putting all of that in digital form. We have put a network together to connect us all, right? And we're spreading that knowledge, that information, spreading everything around to make it equally accessible to everybody. We are responsible for that. We all are sort of caretakers of all of that. So that's big, right? And I think it's easy to sort of get bogged down in all the little technical details. And that's important because those details sort of add up into these bigger things. But we need to also step back and think the reason that we're here is we are now caretakers of this network that we have created collaboratively, and will do so in the future. So I hope that you can take some of this and sort of think about, right, where are we going with all of this? Collectively, what are we all doing? But then individually as well, right? How can I, in my day-to-day work, figure out how to make things more equanimous and build equanimity with my team? That is the important thing, right? A team that you can trust, a culture that you can test, and products that really have meaning in people's lives. So, good luck, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you.